Well, welcome everybody to this presentation by Fleet, courtesy of Earthkind Energy and Ron Kamen. Ron, thanks so much for bringing us all together here today. Maybe we could just actually go around and introduce ourselves, and I'll start out. We'll just keep it really brief. I'm Joe Montori from Sustainable Putnam, and I'm just kind of informally facilitating an ad hoc network of folks interested in electric school buses and advocating for them in their communities and in their school districts. I'll pass it on to Ron.
Hi, folks. I'm Ron Kamen. I'm principal of Earthkind Energy Consulting. For almost 4 decades, we've been working with communities and government, nonprofits, businesses to help them make clean energy transformations that reduce their carbon footprints and save them money. And I've been doing some work with Highland to get this really innovative, wonderful model of how schools can get electric school buses and get the charging stations and everything without an impact on their capital budgets, which I think is critical for most schools. So I'm very excited about sharing this with you and having Claire and Emily discuss the Highland model and how it might work for you.
Claire and Emily, our presenters, if you could introduce yourselves and take it away.
Sure, I can start. My name is Emily. I am a fleet solutions specialist with Highland Electric Fleets. Joe was actually my high school history teacher, so that's one way we got connected. I grew up in Chappaqua, New York. I live in Boston now. We're looking forward to speaking with you all today. Thanks for joining. And Claire is going to lead the presentation, and maybe I'll chime in with answers to questions. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. I am happy to be here today to talk to y'all. I am on the market development team at Highland, and I'm based in Washington, D.C. So I cover D.C., Maryland, Virginia, New York, Texas, and Georgia. It's always a fun game to try to remember the states that I cover. It's kind of a mismatch. But before that, I was at Advanced Energy Economy, which was a business nonprofit for advanced energy, and I was doing all transportation electrification policy, both regulatory and legislatively. And I was focusing specifically on New York. And Mariah, like you mentioned, the lease term extension and the mandate that's come into place during this past legislative session. So it did not cross my mind to mention that, but I just made a note, Mariah, that I'll kind of go over the things that have changed coming out of this 2022 legislative session during the end of my presentation. But let me share my screen. And also, I'm not from New York, like Emily or Ron. So I'm from the faraway land of Texas. So forgive me for any Texan, for any y'alls that I throw in. That's where that comes from. Okay. And can I get just a thumbs up from anybody? Awesome. Great. Okay. All right. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of background on Highland. We're a relatively
Claire, I don't want to interrupt you. You're on like presenter mode. Maybe if you could see the full screen.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. Sorry, I should. Okay, is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, sorry everybody. I should figure that out. I think my Microsoft PowerPoint updated in the middle of the night or something. Okay, so, and also I will share this PowerPoint with Joe, and he can send it along to all of y'all afterwards so that you can look at it at your own pace. Like I was saying, we're a relatively new company, started around 4 years ago, and we're based up in Boston, in the North Shore, Boston and Beverly, Massachusetts. And we just opened a second office in Denver. And we are backed by private capital, over $250 million in private capital. A few things I'll touch on is that we've got the first electric school bus V2G programs in Vermont and in Massachusetts and Beverly. We're also behind the largest school bus electrification project in the US. It's in Montgomery County, Maryland. It's right in my backyard. And we have under 300, or we have over 330 buses under contract right now. So I don't think that I need to spend too much time on this slide. I'm assuming this is a group that is pretty well educated on the many benefits of electric school buses. I think the one thing that I like to note here is that, you know, there are obvious community health benefits and student health benefits. But you know, that doesn't always appeal to every group. So I think it's also really important that we talk about the resiliency benefits, the way a battery can be used as backup during an emergency situation, and also the budget benefits. A lot of times school districts are operating on a really tight budget. And if they need to slash something, sometimes transportation is one of the first areas to be slashed. And I think the headline for electric school buses for naysayers right now is that they are 3 times the cost of a diesel, and there's a big delta. Obviously, those prices are coming down. But you know, ultimately they can save school districts a lot of money. So I think that's also something that's really important that we talk about. So there's all these benefits that you just saw on that slide and that you already know. So the question whenever Highland was kind of being developed was, well, if there are all of these benefits that are very obvious, why are people or why are school districts not going electric? And I can tell you the simple answer is that when you go to a transportation director and you say, for 3 times the cost of your diesel fleet, I'm going to tear up your depot and put charging infrastructure in, and you're going to have to manage the time that you charge and all of that, you know, people shockingly are not too thrilled. So that is where Highland comes in. And this is kind of the list of all of the things that are involved in school bus electrification, right? You're going from a diesel bus fleet where you fuel your school bus much like you would your diesel car at home, and your maintenance workers are trained on the diesel school buses, and so this list right here is a little daunting. So it's buses, chargers, your maintenance workers will need to be trained now. You'll have obviously lower maintenance costs, but maintenance that will look very different. And then, like I mentioned, that charge management piece, which is really new to school districts. And so that is where somebody like Highland comes in. So we offer a annual subscription price to school districts, and we like to partner with school districts usually somewhere between 10 and 15 years. So, and that's just because spreading that kind of like Mariah mentioned, spreading that cost out over the longest amount of years that we can allows us to give school districts a lower annual price. And this annual price, which I'll go over later, is kind of, we modeled out to be either cost neutral compared to what a school district's paying right now for diesel, or offer cost savings. So, and I like to just hone in on the fact that another great part about Highland is that we're not displacing any drivers, we're not displacing any maintenance workers. It's your drivers, your mechanics, your depot. We provide the whole shebang, as I would like to say. So for that annual subscription price, we provide everything. Kind of our bread and butter is an offering that for the annual subscription price provides everything from start to finish. So that starts with planning. So we design and implement the entire project, meaning that we go out, we walk the depot, we see where charging infrastructure needs to be installed, we see where we're going to park the buses, and a very, very important part of this process also is communicating with the local utility. So we help the school district kind of navigate that relationship, because up front, the utility is doing a lot of the work that's needed to electrify the depot and get it ready for the charging. So we also then budget it out. Like I said, we create a subscription plan. The way that we get the subscription price to either cost neutral or offering cost savings is by wrapping in a bunch of different value streams. I like to visualize it as kind of like a stacked graph. So some of them are obvious, like fuel savings and maintenance savings. We know that those are lower with an electric school bus. You're charging on a kilowatt per hour, which is not as influx as the price of gas. And then on the maintenance side, electric school buses have way less parts. And so those are the obvious ones. Another one that I like to point out is volume pricing. So Highland's the largest purchaser of electric school buses in the US. So we can purchase at a volume that school districts aren't able to. Usually when they're going out to get new school buses annually, it's somewhere below 10 for a medium-sized school district. And we can purchase at a large volume, and purchasing at that volume, a lot like purchasing bulk, paper towels at Costco, you get a lower price. So we can pass that on to our customers. And then two more are, if there's any ability for vehicle to grid revenue, we can help a school district participate in that, and any revenue that they earn, we pass on. And then I think the most relevant now is if there are any local or state or federal grants or rebates available, we can help a school district apply, or in some cases apply on behalf, depends on kind of the fine writing. And if they're awarded that money, we can make sure that that's passed on to them. The next is that we procure the school buses and we manage the construction of the depot upgrades. And this step also is pretty intensive as far as the communication with the utility and making sure that we get everything in the depot physically. And then we train everyone, like I mentioned, we train the maintenance workers, the bus drivers, and we're not displacing any jobs. And this is my favorite part. Because I think that, I think the school bus market as a whole is moving towards electric. And I think providing these skills to maintenance workers and school bus drivers is a really transferable skill. So no matter what school district they're at in the lifetime of their career, I think it's a skill that is really great for them to have. And that's something that we can provide them with. And then once the school buses are out on their route, we help with two aspects. We help with charge management. So we make sure that they are charged every morning and they've got a bus to take the kids out on routes. And then if anything goes wrong with the bus or the charging infrastructure, then we cover that cost. And do I see a raised hand?
Yes. So I'm assuming that somewhere after step 2 and before step 3 comes the point where the powers that be decide to throw in with this plan.
Yep. Yeah. So I would say yes. So it's after 1 and 2. So we, whenever we go and walk the depot, we make sure that it's viable, and then we model out the financials and ensure that we can provide that price that's either cost neutral or offers cost savings. And then that is a decision that needs to be made. Ideally, it's a joint decision that everyone's on board for. So that includes the transportation director and also school business officials and school board members usually.
Then it also says implement in step 1. So I understand designing and planning. What does implementing mean in that context?
Emily, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to?
You go ahead. I was going to add something else if you want to answer that part of the question first.
Yeah, so I think designing and implementing, you're right, Dwight, might not be the best word. That makes it seem like we're, going in and implementing the whole thing before we get past step 2, which is where we need the approval. But I think what that really, I will be honest with you, what step 1 looks like, and I think Emily can speak to this too, is what step 1 looks like is really just us like physically going out to the depot, walking the depot. Do a lot of engineering is involved in that, right? A lot of just all of that stuff. And we don't want to get to I'd say step 1 is probably, there's like early step 1, right? Where we're just kind of discussing things. And then there's late step 1, which maybe is leaning more towards implementation. And that's like us physically going out to the depot and modeling things out, right? We don't want to spend a lot of time on that if we don't have a sense of commitment from the school district. But
so
Emily, I'll let you add to that. Oh, sorry, Dwight.
So maybe as an early part of step 1 or before it comes feasibility.
Yes.
Yep. So that's part of kind of this planning is a lot of what my team does. We meet with school districts, we meet with, various school officials it usually takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months to convince a district that they should go with this type of model and should go electric. So we do kind of the behind the scene work to show them, to put together proposals, to put together this entire plan. And then I will add that most districts have to go through public procurement and release a request for proposal to obtain this type of service. So we kind of push a district to understand our model and and then they have to go through that process, and then we'll respond to their request for proposal with a bid that is super comprehensive, because hopefully we've done a lot of work looking at their current operations and how we can plan. So it's a long process to get them there. I'll just kind of throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Yeah, and I think that's a great, that's also a great point that Emily makes too, which is like, so yeah, we need to get the transportation directors and the school board and the school business officials on board. But before that, there needs to, typically it's an RFP, sometimes it's sole sourcing, but whatever that mechanism is, that may be, it can all add up in time. So we'll go to the next. So I just like to make the point that we can work with school districts that are small, we can work with school districts that are large. I think as we've grown as a company, even though we are still relatively young, it's kind of allowed us to be a little bit more flexible with our offerings and work with a broad mix of school districts. And so I think it's some people's first or intuition that or first thought that a model like Highland is only going to be viable for a larger school district, but we've seen it work for lots of districts. So you can see here, hold on, oh, sorry. You can see here on the map, our largest project, which I mentioned at the start, is in Montgomery County, Maryland. And then the Beverly, Massachusetts project that we have is a fleet of about 30 buses versus the fleet of about 1,500 buses for Montgomery County. So quite the difference in size, but they're both very viable. So I'm going to actually touch on a few details in both Beverly and in Montgomery County. I'm not going to play the video right now, but so in Beverly, this is actually where our headquarters is. We actually are like right across the street from the Beverly School District. And so we partnered with them, and they came to us and they wanted to implement a 2-bus pilot because they just kind of wanted to test the waters and see if electric was something that they're interested in. And it's worked so well for them that we're now working on electrifying their full fleet of 30. And so I think one of the things that I like to, and you can see here, they've got Thomas built Julie's. And they've got bidirectional charging, which means that they're enabled to participate in any vehicle to grid programs. And that's my favorite thing to highlight with Beverly is that this past summer, they were able to participate in National Grid, who's their local utility, their vehicle to grid program, and sell energy back onto the grid. And they made around, I think $8,000 or $9,000 in revenue from that. So it's my favorite thing to highlight with this project. And then Montgomery County, like I said, we're working with them to electrify their full fleet over the next 12 years. They have a fleet of about 1,500 and they have 5 depots. This picture on the left that you see is from their Bethesda depot. That one is electrified. We're working on electrifying 3 more over this summer, and then we'll just have one left. But it's obviously a very big project and has garnered a lot of attention, and it's pretty cool to go out there and stand at the end of the chargers and look down and see all the buses plugged in. So very fun. And those buses are taking kids out to and from school, or they were as of the end of this past school year. So, and actually, I'm just going to go back for a second. So I want to touch on a few things. I want to touch on the New York kind of updated policy landscape, and then I want to touch on the EPA's first round of funding that's out through their Clean School Bus program. So first, I'll touch on the New York. Coming out of this 2022 legislative session in New York, we saw a lot of big changes. So the governor in her budget had proposed both an electric school bus mandate and then tucked away in there because it's not as fun to talk about was a lease term extension. Like Mariah pointed out, the allowable lease term for school buses was 5 years. I think that there were only 5 states at the start of 2022 that had a lease term of 5 years. 3 of those this past legislative session have been extended. New York's has been extended to 12 now, which is really great. And how that applies to the Highland model, or a model like Highlands, is that kind of like I mentioned up front, the more years that we can spread our costs over, the lower the price that we are able to provide a school district. So New York's is 12 now. Also, the flashier of the 2 was a electric school bus mandate that the governor had proposed, and then it was approved by both houses. I think it was the years were altered a little bit during the one house budgets, but ultimately I think they ended up on, by 2027, 100% of school bus sales have to be electric, and then by 2035, 100% of fleets have to be electric. There is the New York medium and heavy duty voucher program that is through NYSERDA right now, has a little bit of funding left. But there, in this upcoming election in November, there will be a really, really big environmental bond on the ballot. And that environmental bond includes money for electric school buses. And that money will be given to NYSERDA, and then NYSERDA will implement that funding. So I talked to a lot of school districts in New York, and I think some people's initial reaction is to wait until November to see if that bond gets passed and that funding becomes available. But like I said, there's still some leftover funding from the Volkswagen settlement that is being put out through NYSERDA right now. And then there are, Highland like companies that can kind of help people start to make progress on it now. And then once that bond money comes out, they can just add on because 2027 and 2035 are not that far away. So the next thing that I'll touch on is the EPA's Clean School Bus Program. This was a program that was funded, a 5-year program that was funded through the infrastructure law that was passed. And it included a charge to the EPA to develop this Clean School Bus Program. So this Clean School Bus Program is for alternative fuels, so it can be for propane, but most importantly, to us at least, is that it can be included for electric school buses, or used for electric school buses, I should say. The first round of that funding is out. The applications for that are due August 19th. So we're coming up on that deadline pretty quickly. But those school districts, so all school districts can apply, but this first round is going to be kind of a weighted lottery style system with some advantage given to low income school districts or rural school districts as classified by the EPA as priority districts. And I also I'll drop that link to the priority district sheet from the EPA so that you guys can look and see what districts are on there. So like I said, they can apply for propane, they can apply for electric, they can apply for up to 25 buses. There can only be one application per district. And so when they're so they can apply for the 25, and when they apply for electric school buses and their priority district, like I mentioned, they can get the most amount of funding available. So I think it's a great thing both for school districts that are looking to go electric and maybe haven't had the funding previously. I also think it's a great way for school districts that just need more buses, because sometimes that is the case. It's a great way to get more buses and have those buses be a lot cleaner likely than the ones that they already have. We are looking at and working with the EPA. They're in the midst of developing the second round of this funding. I know that speed is of the essence to them. Time is of the essence. And it likely will be, I would say probably mid next year, but that's just a guess. And from what I've heard, that one will be a competitive grant program. So one thing I like to note on that is that if it is a competitive grant program, what that generally means is that school districts that have shown interest either to the EPA or have shown interest by implementing electric school buses already will be given priority in a competitive grant style process. And so the last thing I'll say is that Highland's really excited about this EPA program. I am encouraging people to apply, whether they are a priority district or not, for two reasons. One is that we're running a promotion right now. So the districts that with 50 or more buses that apply with us, we'll guarantee them a number of buses dependent on the fleet size, but that is whether they win or lose the EPA program. But the second reason I'm encouraging districts to apply is because I think it's really, really important that this first round of funding is oversubscribed. I think it sends a really good signal, market signal, and a signal of want from school districts to the EPA. And so the EPA, I think, will take that into consideration and not only act quickly and with speed, but also really take consideration into the development of this second round, which are obviously both things that they're doing already. But I think if we can get this program oversubscribed, it'll send a really great signal to the EPA. And with that, I will end there. My cell phone number is on the slide, as well as my email. So feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, I will follow up with Joe with this in PDF form so that he can send it around. And I know that we're recording as well. So thank you.